Jamaree Salyer played left tackle. He did play guard. He even played a little bit of center at Georgia. Georgia's do-it-all offensive lineman in the NFL draft process. I'm Dayne Young. That's Brent Rollins. He's with Pro Football Focus. We're both from UGAsports.com. This is a series where we are going through Georgia's NFL draft eligible players and just kind of giving you the rundown. If you don't know much about the Georgia guys, this is a good intro. If your favorite NFL team has drafted them, maybe you've stumbled upon us on YouTube that way. If you're a big Georgia fan, this is a good recap of what these players meant to Georgia in their time at UGA that culminated in the national championship earlier in 2022. And overall, Brent, with Jamaree Salyer, and we don't think that he's going to be a first 1, 2, 3 round guy. He's going to be mid rounds, I guess at the highest, maybe sneaks into the third. Fourth, I think, tends to be what we're seeing. We'll get into those mock drafts. But just overall with Salyer, what is an NFL team getting in him if they were to draft him?
Consistency and versatility. Those are probably the two words that you're going to hear the draft guys, which I love, by the way, the draft guys and all the adjectives they use. Like it's almost a game, kind of like Jay Billis does with his length and all the various terms that he uses when he does an NBA draft. But
like, can you be a big guy and be scrappy? Because I don't think so. Like Jamaree Salyer can never be a scrappy guy.
No, not going to be scrappy. But I do think you're going to hear the words versatile and consistent
and strong.
Because it's strength. I think that's also another one that you'll probably hear with him as well. And I think that kind of summarizes his time at Georgia, was that you got consistent play from him, not necessarily elite dominant play, maybe in a game or two here or there, but out in a rep or two here or there. But overall, it was just consistent there, never a minus. Like he never had a grade. Like this past season, his overall grade was 68.3, but his pass block grade was actually really high, 86.8. But he never really had a season where, he's down in the 50s or low 60s, where he was just providing kind of replacement level play. He was always consistent, solid there, week in, week out.
He's 6'4", 325 pounds. I will say that he did play heavier than that at the latter part of his senior season. Some of it because of injury, and offensive linemen, when they can't do the cardio that you normally do in the middle of a season, injury happens. The weight management can be a little bit of an issue. I wouldn't say that was a chronic thing that he struggled with at Georgia in his time, but it's something that he'll need to keep tabs on. And I think it's also one reason, just the way that he's built, that a lot of people said at his size, maybe a little bit shorter arms, not quite the best moving feet. They're not bad either. Like,
right, no.
Bad rap for that. I think some people just immediately branded and said, you look like a guard at the next level, so maybe you should play guard. And to the people that said that, when Georgia got in a pinch in the national championship game, he did move back to right guard for the second half, and Georgia had Broderick Jones come in and play left tackle. So essentially what I'm saying, and you mentioned this really as we got started, is whatever NFL team gets Jamaree Salyer, they're getting a guy that can kind of be plugged into a few spots. Though, do you think that's more of a tackle or guard at the next level primarily?
I think in the end, he's still a tackle. Just watching him and when we talk about, and I think the guard thing is as much as he's not an elite athlete. Like his relative athletic score, we've looked at that on each of these breakdowns. His relative athletic score, even as a guard, is 5.6. Like we've seen tons of 9s and 10s from, in the 9s and 10s with a lot of the Georgia guys this year, higher scores than really a lot that we've ever seen. But he's only a 5.6 as a guard. He's 4 point something as a tackle. So you're not going to get the elite athleticism that you're going to see from guys like Penning, Cross, that go high, upper, top 15 kind of picks.
He is a smart player. I think that was pretty evident. Let's kind of get into the tape here. You see him circled on your screen, yes?
Yes, 100%.
All right. So explain to me what we see here. This is in the national championship against Alabama. Jamaree at left tackle. Again, this is before he moved in to play right guard.
A couple things with this is this one primarily is just footwork. This is all about footwork, and that when you talk about offensive line play, the kick step. I've heard many stories of guys that are in the league where it's like, okay, they walk up to the line and they just look like they're just lumbering and barely getting to the line of scrimmage, and then all of a sudden the ball snap and it's kick back, and they're ready to go. Footwork here, guy goes inside, adjusts his hips well once the guy goes in. So right here, 47 goes inside, boom, adjusts his hips out, catches 94, and that's tackle play at its best, when you can be strong enough, push that guy inside to your help, and then be still athletic enough, or at least have good enough footwork to be able to handle it after that when the interior guy comes around at you.
And hope that your mobile quarterback holds on to the football as he scrambles away from you.
Yes, and the interesting part about the athleticism, and then you brought up the point in the national championship specifically, him going inside the guard. Like a lot of talk was made about, oh, that was the thing that saved the day, him going inside the guard. It wasn't really him replacing Erickson at guard that made a difference, I think, in that game as much as it was Broderick Jones had the best game he's ever played. Like straight up the best game he's ever played. He did things in the national championship game that he just hadn't done, and was dominant like no other game we've ever seen him on campus.
It was kind of like Georgia's net offensive line performed better because of that move, not necessarily because Jamaree went. And I mean, he played really well at right guard. Don't get me wrong. He did what he was supposed to do. Here he is, opening game of his senior season against Clemson.
Now, the one part of his measurements on the relative athletic strength that he has is what he did at the combine, 31 reps on the bench, strength. Like that's, I think it's Xavier Thomas there for Clemson, defensive end. And he just, all right, get out of my way.
I love that he goes back and is like, nope, I'm getting a second hit in here. Down.
Yeah, and by the way, you mentioned that there are going to be NFL teams and whatnot who look at that specifically, that one little thing where, hey, I want my linemen to be finishers. Cade Mays always got the sort of pub, or people looked at him when he would, throw around some guy late in the play, things like that, always looking for work. But I think that's a general thing from offensive linemen where you want to see guys that are always looking for work, never, blow through the whistle, playing through the whistle, all that kind of stuff, the cliches that we hear, but that's evidence of it right there.
Same game, different play. And this time in an empty set with a quarterback that, again, this was JT Daniels at the time, not mobile. So left tackle for JT Daniels was a critical position.
And this plays a footwork issue as well. And this is where you talk about, all right, can you be athletic enough in burst to do it? And he was definitely that here, because when you look at his, all right, I'm going to set, then I'm going to get out. And the other thing is the breakdown, and then, all right, punish the little guy. You always want to see big guys punish little guys in this game. And he definitely does that here.
Because you're looking at how far the track is here, and he's got to slip through, have some nimble feet for a guy his size, get to the open field, and engage.
And the other part, the biggest part for me is when you watch him right there, chop his feet and break down. More often than not with him, and one of the things that we'll look at later with some of these plays is how he has too much, not enough kind of hip, lower body bend, and he ends up getting kind of tipping over and being top heavy in a way. And there he got good bend, didn't get too much lean, and was able to strike the defensive player and get him the heck out of the way.
Georgia gets the first down out of it. A little bit of a closer view here, so we can kind of see a bit of a different angle. Here he is at left tackle against, frankly, an inferior front from Vanderbilt.
Very much so. But it's not even, you just want to see, all right, can he get out on the edge? And can he, get out on the edge and make contact? And
this is a tight camera angle, but just wanted to show the footwork of getting out there.
Yep. He was never going to wow from a testing perspective, athletically. And that's why you hear the NFL evaluators and teams and all that, and they say, oh, he's a guard. But, when you watch some of the other things that you're going to see in these clips, maybe not necessarily thinking that he is more of that guard versus tackle. But I think that's where he does start out in the league, is at guard, and becomes the swing tackle. Like, hey, my left tackle got hurt. This guy can play tackle in a pinch, kind of thing.
The other thing, we mentioned this a lot, is the leadership that he brought. I mean, he was Georgia's emergency center still, even into his senior season. Georgia didn't need to go down that road because I think it finally felt comfortable with 2 or 3 guys that weren't Jamaree Salyer. But his junior season, he definitely was the emergency center. And I always thought that having the experience that Georgia had with Salyer and Justin Schaefer, who we'll mention later on in our NFL Draft Series preview, just that experience, I thought it was super helpful for a new center in Cedric Van Pran this past season.
Yeah, and that matters. Like, as much as you don't think it matters, that matters, especially along that position. Guys like Andrew Whitworth that just retire. Said he's going to retire after the Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl, but played well into his 30s. As much of that is upstairs as it is his own physical abilities to handle the position. But here, we talked about the strength part. He moves a guy, a little bit of a double team with Schaefer, and they move a guy who is listed at, I looked on their website, he's listed at 415.
Whew.
That would be, let's see, Desmond Watson, number 21 there for Florida.
21's a weird number for that guy.
4 bills, though. 4 bills he's listed, 4+ bills that he is listed at, and they absolute just now. Granted, once you get somebody that's leverage and being lower, and Schaefer actually does a good job of striking initially, and then Salyer just moves him out of the way. But again, you say, hey, can you move the big guys? Yeah, that's a great still shot that you need to possibly clip and put on there, because that's a, oh crap, I just got destroyed. Kind of vibe.
You think Brent and Cox is ready for Jamaree Salyer not to be around his sphere anymore? Together at Georgia, and then rivals after that, and Brent did not get the better of Jamaree.
Not many matchups. Not many matchups did he get the better of him. Not any, actually. But yeah,
one more time.
Yeah, the strength is there, and you want to see that. And that's what teams are gonna. Right? Maybe he can handle the bigger guys that are along the interior, especially in the league.
Now, guys that are going to be in the league, this time we're pointing out Mr. 31 Anderson here, Heisman hopeful kind of guy, top 10 pick kind of a guy, that kind of success. Again, national championship against Alabama.
And this is where you watch him, and where he gets himself into trouble is the ability to, it's the bend and then his forward lean, and then the defender easily getting off of him because of his lean and inability to bend. And he's a very, you watch him, he's a very stiff athlete. That's why, by the way, that's also why he was a really good pass blocker in certain instances, but especially in the run game. And that's why he saw as a career, his run block grade, not as well, not nearly as high as his pass block grade, for that reason, because you see a lot of reps on his tape, exactly like this one right here, where it's a quicker athlete just taking advantage of him getting a little too much forward with his head and or his upper body, and then slipping it and making a play.
Yeah, when your shoulders are parallel to the sideline, and then the pass rushers behind you. This could have been a bigger gain. I don't know. Hard to tell here what James Cook would do, but this plays dead in the water, just because in a one-on-one matchup, Salyer got beat by a really good rusher.
A potential, likely top 10, maybe even top 5 pick next year.
Yeah.
So it's not like, that's somebody who's not very good. That's a really good player going. But by the way, what are NFL teams going to look at? They want to see you against the best. They want to see you against other NFL caliber players. And you get to see it here. Speaking of, you get to see, which, by the way, that was absolute horrible news for the kid that he, that he tore his Achilles, I think it was, in the pro day. But it's the same sort of thing. Watch him, he gets a lean, where that upper body gets him out of position, and he kind of lends with his outside here, right? Step pulls in, and the quickness of Ajabu to make the spin move gets him off balance, and then he's beat.
It just turns into a little carousel, merry-go-round, any kind of carnival attraction that spins, and that's not what you want to see from your left tackle. I mean, he tries to stay with it. Like, don't get me wrong, he didn't give up and just say this is over. But like you said, just that's a part of his game he's going to have to work on. And I think when people see that on tape, they say, well, if that happens with him at guard, maybe it's not going to be such a catastrophic play. I don't always find that to be the case, especially in the pros.
Well, you mentioned that. And there's one play on here that specific. It's not a big of a deal, but for the most part, they might want to forget it. It's the Stetson fumble play. Like the Stetson fumble play, he is at guard, and Christian Harris absolutely just dekes him and is by him instantly. Like that's one of those where it's like, what does the quarterback do? You can't really do anything in that happenstance. By the way, the other thing I wanted to say about the Michigan play, I bet knowing Mr. Monken like I somewhat do, there were some expletives in the box on this play. One probably specific one. He might have gone
a lot of four letters.
Dropped the bomb, the few bombs there with this play.
Yeah.
That's where you're like, what are you doing, QB?
Yeah.
But anyway, neither here nor there.
I think this may be our last play for Salyer here.
And this is zone blocking, and this is the NFL's run game. Is a lot of zone blocking, and where you've got to beat the guy to the spot, and everybody's working to the right, and he just gets beat to the spot here by a better athlete.
You mentioned how he can play high. I think this is sometimes what that turns into because he's a stronger guy here. He just doesn't have leverage.
Yep, and that's you look at how he gets out of that where he's quick, his feet are quick, but it's as he comes off high and gets a little too high, and then now that as opposed to staying low and being able to possibly win with leverage, the other guy beats the low man wins. You hear that cliche in football all the time, but it's true. It's there for a reason. It's a cliche for specifically that, and he's not the low man here, and he gets beat to the spot.
Yeah, low half here. That's where the leverage is, but then leaning forward, it's not going to be a winning play here for most.
But again, when you think about him in his college career, almost 300 snaps. I think it was 289 at guard. His grade was, I think his overall grade was 72.7. Now, granted, that was a little earlier in his career, not so much later in his career. Some this past season, we saw it in obviously in the national championship game, but that's 1,250 snaps at tackle.
Yeah,
and you got an 82 overall grade and a very high level pass grade with only one sack allowed and almost 800 pass block snaps in his career. But that's still phenomenal from a pass blocking standpoint as a tackle. So I think he starts at guard. Possibly is one of those where, hey, if he sticks there and he's okay there, he stays. But then a team, if he doesn't do well there, possibly even looks at him as, and his role in his life in the NFL might end up being somebody like the guy that just left the Falcons, Gano, I think is his name. That's a swing tackle that can play guard tackle and is always dressed for a game but not a starter kind of role eventually. But I think he gets a chance early to play and do some things initially.
A couple things to mention, and then we'll get to where you think he might get drafted as you've been scouring those mock drafts. Special teams was something Jamaree Salyer played virtually his whole career, especially when Georgia was punting. He was kind of the safe man. So that's something that I think he could still do at the next level. I think in the pros, they tend to want you to have a bit more athleticism than he has, but he can do it.
Well, and the pros doesn't do the sort of spread out punt a lot or as much as what you see in college. Theirs is more of a sort of traditional punt formation for the most part.
Mainly just pointing out that he did play a lot of special teams.
But yes, and you're going to obviously field goal and extra points, things like that. But when you mentioned the mock drafts, so Daniel Jeremiah does not have him in his top 50. Dane Brugger has him at 49th. So that's the highest ranking. And then PFF has him at 69. So his number.
Nice.
So there you go.
That's what I was going to mention is that as a fan of all things 69 and the jokes that are correlated with it, Jamaree Salyer represented it proudly for years. And that jersey now gets passed on to, I don't know, maybe Ernest Green or something. I guess we'll find out. But, Jamaree, see, to me, that's a natural one that you want for even just like the bookstore NIL stuff. Because then there's idiots like me that are like, well, that's the funny one.
Yes, that will always have and I can always make jokes related to it. But I think in terms of draft position, like we've actually done this in order of what we think how they're going to go. And this week, Daniel Jeremiah just released an updated sort of post free agency mock, and we had Trayvon first. He had Trayvon at 2. There we go.
So we're right.
if someone's talking about Trayvon going at 2, I think we should feel pretty confident about us having Traylon first. Now we had Nakobe second, and you see
to clarify, the first Bulldog off the board. That's the order they were going. Yeah.
Yes. But he also had Jordan Davis, I think at 12, Wyatt at 15, Nakobe later part of the first round. But I think Salyer, to me, I don't think he gets past the third round. I think he's somewhere in that late third round, much like what was a couple years ago, Solomon Kinley went late third round to the Dolphins. Yeah. I think he finds himself late third round, mainly because of those adjectives that we talked about early, the versatility part.
We end with my game of this guy feels like a blank for whatever reason, the color of the jersey, the history of drafting Georgia players, whatever it may be. I think Jamaree Salyer feels like a Cincinnati Bengal.
That's hilarious, by the way, because at the bottom of my notes, I write the team, and because of all their offensive line issues, and they've addressed a lot of it in free agency, by the way.
Getting Collins,
they've Lyle Collins at right tackle, some guys in the interior. They've definitely done the free agency for need, but I wrote Bengals just as another guy for them to add depth and the tradition and the history of drafting Georgia players. Like that's good, same page. And we did not talk about that, by the way.
No, we didn't. We would never. And like, I'm facetious about a lot of things. This is not one of them. I just obviously there's the position of need there.
Yes.
But the versatility that we keep talking about, that's what you need right now in the NFL to be able to survive the amount of games that they have to play. I mean, there's so many injuries across the lines of scrimmage, and I think it'll be a valuable piece for a contender. And I think the Bengals are in that window now that you have to compete while Burrow's contract is manageable. So they have probably another 2 years or so before it gets really hard, just the math of how the NFL works, to compete on a yearly basis.
Very much so. But yeah, I think that's a great spot for him. And much like Kansas City last year, heavily went after the offensive line, got Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith later in the draft. I think somebody like Salyer could be a benefit for the Bengals, those guys those teams that have offensive line needs, but also the versatility part, like you said.
Well, that's Jamaree Salyer. If you like what we're doing here on our UGA Sports YouTube channel, it would mean a lot to us if you subscribe and check out our other NFL draft previews. We're going to do these for all of Georgia's draft-eligible players. We'll pair some at the end that maybe we don't know if they get drafted because they ran, a 4.8 and they're a defensive back, so we'll have to see how that goes. But overall, we're having a good time doing this series. We appreciate you watching, whether you're a Georgia fan, whether you're an NFL fan that stumbled into this. We're hoping it's a good resource for you to understand more about these guys if they wind up on your favorite NFL team and see where they go from there.